Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us at Day 2 World Green Economy Summit. I'm sure that you all had great times yesterday. We have a lot of interesting and insightful sessions scheduled for today, and this is one of them. Let me introduce myself and my speakers. First of all, my name is Maymun Khadra. I'm a business anchor for Al Arabiya. And I'm really excited about the topic we're going to be discussing today with our guests. We have Adri Paul, CEO, Desalinitaire, and Rana Kurdi, founder and CEO, Skydrops Sustainable Water Technologies. Now, before I let my speakers introduce their companies, because I think this discussion is really important to highlight, first of all, what their company does before we delve into the details. So when we talk about food and water security, we all know that these two are the pillars of both human well-being and global stability. The discussion today will look at how climate stress is reshaping these essentials and explore the innovative solutions and technologies that are needed to build resilience. Let me go right directly to Rana and Adri. Thank you so much for joining us. So before we start, I would like you, Adri and Rana, to tell us a little bit about what both your companies do. Please go ahead, Adri.
Thanks a lot. I'm really happy to be here. So I'm Adri. The company I work for is called Desalinator. I'm really proud to join them recently. The two co-founders, one technical, one commercial, and I'm helping here to scale a fantastic Eureka idea, which was actually born here in the region in Abu Dhabi. To say it really simple, Desalinator is desalination using solar energy. So if you would want to explain what we do, that for instance a plant we have built here in Dubai for Diwa, we take seawater, we make it drinking water using sunlight. As simple as that.
Fairly simple.
Yes. So it's actually, of course, a little bit more complex, and I will tell you a little bit more about it later. But so that's one way of how we do it. It is using something which is abundantly available, in this case heat, and using that heat to do distillation of water. So we kind of boil the water and make it ultra pure, which is about 100 times cleaner than this bottle of mineral water.
Wow, that's interesting. So, Rana, tell us about Skydrops.
Thank you, May. Thank you for having me. So for Skydrops, I think what's really interesting about our technology is we actually can make water from the air. So in the sense that you don't need an actual water source. So we manufacture water from the air utilizing the humidity in the air. So one of the things I laugh about is this region is full of energy and oil, but also your humidity is a source that I don't think will ever run out. So basically we collect the humidity from the air, we purify the air, then also we purify the water to make ultra pure water, and at that point we try to do everything sustainably, so we bottle it in reusable glass and aluminum, and we distribute it to our customers.
That's fairly simple as it sounds. I'm not an engineer, so I like how it sounds. It's fairly simple. So Adri, you actually turn seawater into fresh water, and Rana, you create water out of thin air, so that's very innovative. Now let's talk about the technologies behind each of these two methodologies. So for desalination, it's been used for years. It's not a new technology, but we have a lot of new technologies coming online, especially now with that we are on the age of AI. So how are you actually mobilizing AI technologies and innovations in what you do, Adri?
So I think there are many solutions. We have a big need for water. I would say water is probably the most undervalued, but the most valuable source we have in the world, much more than oil. Looking forward, we will all be needing water, and particularly for agriculture. From that point, 70% of all the water which we use in the world is going to agriculture. And talking about AI, this is catching up super rapidly. I'll tell you a little bit more about AI and the link to water, because actually AI consumes a lot of water to cool the data centers. Let me get back to you on that one. But you said desalination is not new, correct? But we're here at the Green Energy Summit, so we need to find ways to do this on a more sustainable way. So the standard approach is reverse osmosis in this region, which is useful, but it also generally means pushing water through a membrane with a lot of power. The power we generate generally by burning gas, so a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. And in the process, you will get something which is called brine, which is like salt slurry, and it will be mixed with a whole bunch of chemicals to clean these membranes to make sure that they don't clog. So in the process of using the old, let's say, tested method of reverse osmosis, you will have a lot of greenhouse gas emissions, and you will have a lot of actually toxic brine, which will generally be dumped back into the ocean. Normally you say, that's a drop in the ocean. But locally, I can tell you, it's devastating for marine life, because a whole day we're taking water from the sea, we take something and dump back only salt, chemical salt, slurry back into the ocean. So if you look at the salinity here in the Gulf, it's a lot higher than elsewhere in the world because of all of the desalination as well, and it's getting worse. And that's where we actually believe we have a solution. We don't have any greenhouse gas emission at all. It's zero. And the brine, actually, we can circulate and make it a solid and reuse it, for instance, in the chemical industry, in the pharma industry, in textile, etc. So it is thinking of new solutions to problems that were already there. And again, I think we need multiple solutions for desalination. It's similar, my background is in the energy industry. It's not, shall we all choose solar? Shall we all choose wind? Shall we all choose nuclear or gas? It's a combination of all of these things. A base load, you have intermittent solar and wind, and then you bring gas-fired power plants to even that out, and batteries, etc.
I love the idea that you just mentioned. We're going to go back to that idea about AI data centers and how much water does it consume, because usually we talk about how much energy data centers consume, but I'll come back to you, Adri, with that. But to you, Rana, and when we talk about atmospheric water generation, so this is fairly a new technology, but how do you see it evolving in the next couple of years, and especially that you were mentioning to me earlier that your plant in Qatar depends on thermal power. It doesn't require any electricity. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So just a little bit about the technology that we're utilizing. So we've teamed up with what we believe is the best atmospheric water generation technology that comes out of the US, named Tsunami. And they've basically manufactured what's currently has the lowest kilowatt usage and basically the highest water output. So just to give you an idea, the machines that we utilize under Tsunami can produce up to 1,400 liters of water per machine on only 4.5 kilowatts of energy. So this is pretty magnificent.
Efficient.
Absolutely. And then it's basically the technology is really quite simple. The technology has been utilized by the United States military, and it's also been utilized by FEMA, which is a disaster relief government organization as well. And the technology is really quite simple, so I'm going to just kind of break it down so everyone can understand it. So basically, it's a backwards AC system, if you will. So instead of pushing air out, we actually suck air in. And at that point, it goes through a coil system. That's really where the patent process under Tsunami is. And from that point, it just takes the water molecules and condenses it and pushes out ultra-clean water. During that time, like I said, there's air filtration and then also multiple steps of water filtration. So kind of similar to desalination, I would say the major difference is you can't capture salt from the air. You also can't capture hard metals from the air. And then we do not do any sort of like chlorination process because it's not really required. Again, it's a different water source. So from that point, when we're actually pushing out the water, at that point we do again something similar. We mineralize the water. For us specifically for Skydrops, we have labeled ourselves more of a premium water brand. And so we put them in these really cool, sexy bottles and push them out to our consumers. Now, for the future of the atmospheric water generation, really the technology has been around for almost 10 to 12 years. I know the manufacturers that we use with Tsunami in the US, they've been developing it for almost 12 years. And it has gotten a lot better over time. And even with the new generations that are come out, Tsunami has, their newest generation is going to blow everyone's mind away. We're very excited to showcase it in the sense that not only are you going to be able to make water, but remember that air we talked about that we sucked in. So imagine if you could push that same air out, but now at 50 degree Fahrenheit, and basically AC an entire warehouse. So this is actually being tested right now in Texas in an Amazon warehouse. So this is really, really exciting on super low kilowatts. And then the new generation also have a winterization plan, because basically those coils, as the temperature rises, potentially those coils can freeze. So basically it really limits the water that you can make. So with this new generation we have, it really doesn't matter what the temperature is. And typically to make water, regardless of which company you're with, you need about 30 or more % humidity. The new technology that Tsunami's pushing out with under sky drops is now at 20% humidity, and regardless of what the temperature is. So this is really exciting. And one of the things that we want to move forward with Skydrops is our newest plant that is going to be right now the largest plant in the world, is actually going to come off the grid. We're going to introduce thermal ground energy into being able to go green, basically, to make our water. I think this is really important to be able to showcase, as kind of partially as well, to showcase maybe an emergency management system. I think, we talked about this, Mr. Pohl and I talked about this. I think it's really important that every country has water independence, and for us to get to that point, there should be multiple water sources, right? So desalination, atmospheric, parts of the Europe and of course the United States, we don't really think about these things because we have multiple sources. But in the Middle East, really your only source is the ocean. So to bring in secondary water sources is really, really important, especially in times of emergencies. The first thing to go during a tsunami, during an earthquake, during a war is water, right? And without getting political, it is being weaponized. And we really believe that the future of water is in the air. And so this is one of the things we're pushing at, is let's look at it as in the sense of emergency management systems.
Yeah, Adri, I would love to hear you.
Yeah, so I would like to build on what you're saying, Rana, the importance of water, and particularly here in the region as well. To give you some idea, not everybody might be spending day and night in the water, in the swimming pool, or actually in the business. But by 2030, the demand for water, for fresh water, will be 40% higher than the supply across the world. This is one. By 2030...
because of demand population growth only?
Exactly, yeah. So that's one of the items. If you look at 2030, we will have 1/4 of all the countries around the world which will have high or extremely high water stress, which means that they really, like in Cape Town, you have day zero. That means that they run out of water and there's no water anymore which they can use. So by that time, we actually need $7 trillion of investment in water infrastructure around the world. But that means also that we really need to invest in new technologies such as yours, such as mine, to come up with solutions which can actually satisfy all of these, let's say, demands across the world. And particularly in this region, I used to live here in Abu Dhabi. I understand that water is really, really scarce. And I must say, particularly here in the UAE, the focus of finding that innovation, finding new solutions to this is fantastic. And we've got this X Prize I told you about. This is actually the biggest contest, the biggest prize ever in history of mankind, sponsored by Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, MBZ Water Initiative, for $150 million, where they said actually we would invite all of these young companies to come with solutions for water, and we will have a prize pot of $119 million. First prize, $40 million. So we encourage people to come with a solution. First start small, make 1 cubic meter of water per day. Then next year, do 100 cubic meters of water per day. And then the year afterwards, 1,000 cubic meters of water, which is 1 million liters of water per day. For those companies who come up with a solution, they will give the prize. And I just got back from New York, where we had Climate Week last week. They announced who got into phase 2 of this one, and we are one of the lucky ones to go in there.
Congratulations!
Yes.
So we'll know the final result by the year 2027, as I have understood.
Yes. Yeah.
So maybe
Take some time.
at WGES 2027, we're going to have you back again. I'm going to remind you of this particular moment when you told us about this prize and that you've been nominated to the second phase.
For sure, and I will treat everybody on a bottle of water by then. Or more.
At least.
Yes.
At least.
Yeah.
You're winning what,
$40 million.
$40 million. We're going to ask for more than a bottle of water. That's definitely.
Yeah, but I mean, so this shows the interest. The previous biggest prize ever was sponsored by Elon Musk. It was about carbon capture. And now it's Mohammed bin Zayed saying, okay, next level, water, let's solve this.
Okay, so this is very interesting news we're hearing from Adri, but I think, Rana, you have very important and interesting news to share with us regarding Skydrops. So please, let's make headlines.
Thank you so much. So we're really excited we're going to be announcing here in the next couple of days that Skydrops is going to become publicly listed company under the London Stock Exchange.
Congratulations.
So we're very, very excited to be we partnered up with an incredible and global investor to basically go global. So the future of Skydrops is global.
So you start, that's big. You started here in Qatar, and now you're going global. And what's the plans, for the next 3 years when it comes to the usage of atmospheric water technology? Now that you've gone public.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what we've done in Qatar. We never meant to just stay in Qatar. It was really just a pilot program to kind of kick things off. We really wanted to just showcase what can be done, and seeing is believing, right? So you've really got to showcase it. So the future of Skydrops is we are going to Saudi, and we're opening up a pretty large water plant in Dammam to be able to service into Iraq, which is also suffering with some water scarcity, and also another water plant in Malaysia to basically service that area and also export into Australia, another very water scarce country. But most things that I'm excited about is we're going to be the first Middle Eastern water company, excuse me, to export to the United States and sell to the United States. So this is really, really exciting. And what started off kind of as a sustainability project has really also become a regional pride project.
An international project.
Exactly, a pride project in the sense that, yes, the Middle East can offer great energy and oil, but we can offer really clean, amazing water as well.
And to link this to what Adri was mentioning earlier, that when we think about the future of humanity and the future of the region, we always think about energy. But water is as important as energy, and especially that, as Rana was describing it before, it's an element that can be weaponized, and that we have seen it historically happen. But what interests me, Adri, is what you mentioned about data centers. Whenever we mention data centers, AI data centers, we mention how much energy does it consume. But this huge amount of energy requires a cooling mechanism that depends on water. So is this something that we have, as humans, as humanity, we have to start worrying about, especially that now we are in the age of AI?
Yes, I would start to worry, but there is a solution. No.
Good news.
No, so this is I just told you that 70% of all to put it in perspective, of all the water on the world, 98% of that we cannot drink, because it's salt water. So we've got about 2-3% left. 2/3 of that is in glaciers and icebergs, etc., meaning that less than 1% of all the water in the world is fresh water which we can drink. Of all that water, 70% we use for agriculture. Now comes AI, using massive amounts of energy and water. The water is used to cool these data centers. It's always a balance. Either you can do air-cooled or you can liquid-cooled. If you're going to do air-cooled, you will need much more energy. If you do liquid-cooled, you use the water. So generally, these data centers, we call them water guzzlers. They drink water, actually. And what we have done, I told you about desalinator, that we use sunlight, which we need to use the heat from the sun to turn seawater into clean water. What we can also do is use the heat from a data center as a power source to make ultra pure water to cool the data center. So this is almost too good to...
full cycle.
It's a full cycle. We just filed the patent on this. Nobody has ever thought of this one before. We filed the patent, so nobody can actually take this from us, and we're speaking to the very biggest data centers, both here in the UAE, in Saudi, as well as in the USA and in Europe. Because for them, they have they understand this is not sustainable, what's happening. In fact, USA was here, the president, to say we're going to build 5 gigawatt here in the UAE of data centers. And those people supposed to build it, I asked them, I said, what's the biggest data center you've ever built? 100 megawatt. So this is 50 times bigger than the biggest one they have ever built. Just imagine the amount of water to be used for that. And if you find a smarter solution of actually turning a data center from a water guzzler into a net water producer. So you can even, if you want, you can give back the water to the community because they pull water from the ground. The community might open the tap, there's no more water. In fact, you will see Google went to set up a data center in Chile, cancelled. Local community says it's not coming here. Data center in Arizona, cancelled. Local community said it's not happening here. We want our water, we want to be able to survive and drink.
So they understand the issue that is related to,
It's massive.
To AI. Yes, go ahead, Rana.
I just want to add one thing too. It's a little bit technical, but I think it's really important to know also about the data centers is this water that they use can't be recycled. Most of it ends up actually evaporating. So in the sense you're constantly pulling this water back in, and again, depending on the data center, but the fact that the majority of that water that is being pumped in just evaporates. So a lot of people say, oh, just recycle or reuse the water. That's not always the case.
Yeah, that's exactly, so in our case, you don't need the evaporation tower anymore, because you will actually have the water turn it back into our system in a closed loop. It feels weird in this region to try to get rid of the heat by evaporating water.
So that's why it's amazing this technology comes out, because what's happening right now is the water's just being pumped in, it's evaporating, then
and
it's
we're losing
gone,
this water.
and then you're just, exactly. So I just wanted to mention that. Mm-hmm.
So when we think about water, we usually think about it in terms of drinking water, when it's actually, it's not only about drinking water, it goes into agriculture. So anything that we use on day-to-day basis is essentially has a water component in it. It's industrial as well, and now we have, as we were discussing, it comes to be part of technology as well. And to you, Rana, to what extent do you think that, looking at this region, it's a huge agriculture region, climate stressed at the same time, we have water instability, water scarcity, so we have a very critical triangle of issues that relates to water. So to what extent do you think that it's really important for governments and for entities in the Middle East to actually start depending more on innovations when it comes to securing water?
Yeah, absolutely. I can actually speak on this for Qatar, for example. One of the issues that we've been involved in a bidding, government tender process is we've seen it from an agriculture from greenhouses to where the issue is that the greenhouses would get so hot and the humidity would be so high that the majority of the plants would rot, right? Because of all the mold and everything that's growing. And also we saw it in issues with dairy farms as well, where once again the heat is so high and the humidity gets so high and the cows can't handle the heat. So they'll get sick, and if they're sick, that means they're not producing as much milk, and the problem goes on and on. So for, again, the machines that we use, we have some specialized machines that are specifically for agriculture, where the natural process of sucking up the humidity from the air can lower the humidity by 30%, and then once again irrigate, because you're taking in that humidity and push the water out. And so at this point you're irrigating and using the water, again, ultra pure, no salt, no nothing, being pushed out into there, and you could really control whatever nutrients that you want to add, which is such a huge piece. And I think the differentiation between like desalinized water and then our water is just the fact that you don't need the water source. So in the sense, wherever it is you want water, you could drop these machines. As long as there's a minimum of 20% humidity, you can make water. You don't need to pipe, you don't need to dig, you don't need to upset the environment, and you can make water on demand as it happens. And I think that we're going to continue to see these sorts of innovation, like my colleague here has come up with as well, because really growing food in this region is a science project. I mean, I hate to say it, but it's kind of a science project, because you don't have the environment that it's very natural to grow. So from where I am right now in North Carolina, I could just throw seeds on the ground and something will grow at some point. So I think that innovation has got to be involved. And one thing I do want to mention that I think is really important that isn't mentioned enough is that these sorts of technologies don't come from large corporations. They just don't. They come from young kids in a basement coming up with these amazing innovations, 40-something-year-olds starting their own companies and coming up with innovations. And I think those types of companies, small, medium enterprises, I think really the government really should support, because that's where technology and innovation really rise. And I think programs like he's involved with, and also I know the UAE is definitely leading in supporting small and medium-sized enterprises, and I think that's so important in the drive for that innovation to be brought here regionally.
So Adri, yeah, I want to ask you about that. What does it tell us when we don't see big companies around the globe actually coming up with these innovations? They're relying on startups, as Rana was saying. What does that tell us?
Well, actually, my background is with big companies. When I lived here, I worked for General Electric, GE. At the time, we had 360,000 people, and it doesn't really drive innovation. Right now, I'm managing a team of 20. Before this, I was working in the agricultural technology. I had 500 people. It's still fun. If you're like 100,000, 200,000, 300,000, it's not just going to happen over there. And I really believe that the way these things happen is you need these small companies to do things. And I've had it actually in a previous phase of my career. They will come up with something really cool, and then you need to scale it. So my previous role, I was building something which was energy storage in batteries. And if you're a small company, like you're 20 people, we've got 20 people, it's tough to say, let's try to conquer like 5 continents simultaneously. Then comes in a big corporation, they buy the company, and they help you scale. So in this case, I say, okay, I want to enter the market in Japan. And they open up let's say, all registered. We've got an office. They set up meetings with the embassy. There's like a red carpet coming out. And yes, I must admit, as and when big corporations buy smaller companies, some of the innovation, some of the fun will disappear. But even if you lose like 20, 30% of, let's say, all the smart kids, you still have like 70% of them around, plus the power of the big corporation to do it. So I really believe you need the small ones and you need the big ones. And at the right moment in time, they come together and the big ones will help to scale the small ones. But in this X Prize, for instance, as an example, there were a couple of like gigantic water companies who tried to partner, like 3 massive companies partnering, like representing probably 500,000 people. They didn't make it to the round where we got right now because they're just too difficult to try to get all of these guys to work together. So you need us to be agile, as you call it, the kids on the attic or in the garage, and then over time we need to scale it, and that's what we get.
So because when we're talking about water security innovations, we're talking about not only sustainability, but we're talking about efficiency, the costs, scalability, as we were mentioning. So Rana, it's really quite a difficult balance to have between all these components and all of these pillars.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as we were mentioning, a lot of startup founders, they're coming in with very small capital. And unfortunately, the system is set up, banks are not going to give you loans for young startups. Green financing is just kicking up, but I think one of the issues with green financing is that it's once you're ready to scale up, it's once you've already gone to the market, and you really need the support prior to that. I think the banks and investors really need to see that vision prior to that. Because really at that point, if you've gone to market and you've already broken even, I mean, how much help do you really need at that point unless you're really trying to go global? And I do want to say a point about what my colleague said is that I think that global investors and are recognizing that if they're going to invest in a startup, that it's really smart to keep on the founder. I could definitely tell you our investor, that was something they were very adamant about, is the founder remains, the founder stays. Because a lot of times, like he said, is the company becomes something that you never really envisioned, and it wasn't really at the heart of what you wanted. And then the founder exits, and unfortunately, that creativity, that vision and everything just kind of, exits as well. So I think it's really, really important to keep that drive in a company to move it forward.
So when you look at different technologies that are being now used, whether in desalination or alternative technologies like atmospheric water generation or even other technologies, how do they compare costs-wise, Adri?
Yeah, so it depends very much on the local situation. So what we're doing, indeed here for DIWA, we built a plant to demonstrate that we can do it. It was a small plant. We did 25,000 liters of water a day. For our normal commercial plant, it's 1 million liters of water a day. So this was like a demonstration. It depends where you are. So what we can do, and as I said, similar to the energy infrastructure, in the old days, there were only centralized systems. You had a big generally coal-fired power plant or a gas-fired power plant. That was it, and you've got the grid, and then everybody got electricity. These days, here, but also around the world, people will do decentralized distributed energy generation. So you'll have solar panels on your roof, for instance. So that's the way we see the water sector also developing. That means not everything should be done centrally. You would also be able to put some stuff decentrally, meaning also that you don't need to put, as you say, these massive pipelines in to get something from A to B through the desert, because you can do it locally. We can even do it off-grid as well. We don't need...
because this needs extra financing for the infrastructure.
It's massive. So you need actually to find out per situation what makes most sense. So if I need to actually get water in Al Ain, will I be piping that from Dubai or from Abu Dhabi? Or will I say, well, I can do it here locally? So depending on the situation, depending on the regulations, for instance, with the reverse osmosis I just mentioned, you actually have this problem of the brine. In the old days, they would just drill a well, inject it into the ground, so it would get saltier and saltier and saltier. Now here, and also in Saudi, we see that the regulation is changing. Normally just dumping the brine back into the desert or injecting into the ground is not allowed anymore. One of the use cases we're looking at right now, people we need to truck the brine away to get rid of it. That's $3.50 per cubic meter of brine. The price of water is below $1 per cube. So trucking away the waste is $3.50, and the water is supposed to be less than $1. Gives you an idea. So per situation, you need to find out which solution it makes most sense. Is it direct air capture? Is it going to be desalination using solar energy, or using another form of waste heat from industry, using geothermal, whatever? So it depends. And if you look at the big cases, actually, unfortunately, I don't have the solution. If you're looking at the city of Los Angeles or the city of Dubai, the big old systems, yeah, they are, let's say, over time getting a little bit better, a little bit faster, a little bit cleaner, etc., but no dramatic changes. But I don't have a solution for those. We just focus on, let's say, our niche, which is about between 1 million and 10 million liters. That's where we are strong, and somebody else needs to solve the other world problems.
But I like what you mentioned, Rena. I want to come to you with this. I like what Adri was mentioning about regulations. Now, we know to solve this problem, whether in food or water security, you don't need only the government, you need the private sector as well. So there needs to be some kind of collaboration and partnerships. And at the same time, the regulatory environment needs to support this ecosystem. So to what extent do you think that when you look at the Middle East, what is lacking there in terms of regulation supporting innovations when it comes to food and water security?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I think it's really important. When we first arrived and brought the technology, it was very, very challenging in the sense that we were the pioneers to bring the idea of taking these generators, instead of just giving them to an individual who may have like a cabin in the woods and wants to make their water, that we wanted to do it on an industrial scale, on a much larger scale. So when we showed up in Qatar, in the whole GCC, there was no regulations whatsoever, no standard operating procedures, no checklists. When we were dealing with the ministry, it was very, very difficult in the sense we were told this is going to take 1.5 years at a minimum to get approved. And with my military background, I never take the first no or the second or the third. So we got it done in 3 months. But it was extremely challenging, and we had to work directly with the ministries, with the not just the Ministry of Public Health, Ministry of Environment, and Civil Defense, and all of it to really bring them on board. And there were some systems that had to be added to our water plant that frankly were unnecessary and very costly for us that we didn't see coming because they were so used to the idea of desalination plant that they wanted to apply what applied to desalination plant. Oh, you need to apply this to atmospheric water generators, even though it made zero sense. It's a completely different process. And I think there's a trust process that happens there. So now, a year later, okay, they know that the system works, it's working well, and I think one of the biggest concerns about an atmospheric water generation plant is in Qatar, for example, we have the 13th worst air quality in the world, and so the concern of, okay, if you're taking this water from the air, is it clean? Yeah, absolutely. It goes through an air filtration system. And again, this technology is being used by the military under heavy R&D, research and development. So that was one of the things they were concerned of. And then on top of it all, where we decided to set up was actually in the free zone that was across from a desalination plant and next to the airport. And so the inspector came in and said, this will never work. You know, there's no way, because you have a desalination plant. It's not one of the newest ones, but it's releasing a lot of toxins in the air. And then you have the airport that's releasing a lot of toxins in the air, and now you want to take water from the air. So we took the water from the air and they tested it. And just so you can understand how difficult it is to trust new technology, when it came out so clean that it didn't even land on the report for any toxins, they tested it multiple times, even through private entities, just to make sure the data was correct. So I think it's a trust process with this innovation with the government to bring it on. And it's the constant checks and balances of the Ministry of Public Health being inside of our water plant on a monthly basis and just ensuring that this new technology is doing what we're saying it's doing. But I think now the trust level is much different, and even in the consumer, it's much different. Again, it's a process. If you're going to break it into something that's never been done before, you have to know that you've got to work with the entities and the governments to make it work for you. There's really no way around it.
Go ahead, please.
If I could just build on that. So you talked about the role of the government, etc., and regulation. I think particularly in the region as well, something which we will see gradually happening but should be accelerated is the metering and the pricing of water, so that people actually have an incentive to use less. If you have a farm or a hobby farm or whatever, so do you really have an incentive to use that water in a wise way? And that hasn't been happening across the region in UAE, in Saudi, in Qatar, etc. There's really room for improvement there. Using other ways. So, for instance, I've spent the last 4 years before that in controlled environment agriculture. If you're looking at, for instance, in greenhouse, you're looking at water reduction of about 90% for 1 kilo of tomatoes in a greenhouse versus an open field. Because in the open field, you spray the water, it evaporates. Yeah. So using those kind of technologies, and you will only get people to use that if they have an incentive to use that, or they must be really, really nice and sweet people. But if they think, oh, this is getting really expensive, spraying all of this water, then it changes. But I also think that the government doesn't only have a regulatory role, but also maybe more of a supporting role. So I'm quite proud, actually, here in the audience as well, of the Dutch government supporting Dutch companies abroad, such as ourselves over here, opening doors. If I come here, I can literally send a WhatsApp to the ambassador of the Netherlands and say, I'm here, I bring investors, can you make some meetings happen? And they will do that for us. So that helps. So I'm very, very grateful to the ruler here of the UAE, but also for the Netherlands. And we are actually historically a country which is fighting the water, because most of our country is below sea level. So we've got a whole abundance of water technologies which we can actually also spread to other places, and happy to bring it here.
Okay, so let me ask you one final question before I open up the stage for some questions from the audience. When you look at a bottle of water, because you're the water experts now, so I'm going to ask you the question right ahead. So when you look at a bottle of water, as consumers, as people who drink water and bottled water, what are the most important metrics that we should be focusing on? Because we have many brands. I'm sure that many of you, when we go to the supermarket, we have 1 million brands of water bottles, and each bottle has a headline on it. So considering that you're the water experts, what are the most important metrics for you when you want to pick the right bottle of water? Adri?
To be honest, May, I will leave the bottles of water for Anna here. The water which we are making is ultra pure. So the water we are producing, actually we have built a plant in Alain as well, is 100 times cleaner than Evian water. So actually what we need to do is to remineralize this water and to put exactly the ingredients, because this is actually my Dubai. There you can just look at the ingredients. It's a recipe how to make this water. So the way we do it is we actually ask the farmers in this case, so let's do some A/B testing and put some more minerals of this, some calcium.
So minerals
magnesium.
are really important to be
Yes.
available in drinking
Yes,
water.
otherwise it's too clean. If we would be drinking the water we're producing in the desert, it will actually extract the minerals from your body. So we need to remineralize it. We have 1 part per million. This will have about 100 parts per million of minerals and other solids in there. So, but for the bottles of water, I would leave it to the expert here.
So one thing we learned from you, Adri, is minerals in water are essential when we talk about drinking water. What else, Rana?
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I want to say before that is drinking water is just like anything else that you put in your body, right? Like food.
Yeah.
Okay, a lot of us may just buy regular vegetables from the grocery store and we're okay. Others, they focus on, the dirty 12 and buy organic for those ones. So it's a matter of what sort of level of health are you really trying to achieve? What are your health goals? Drinking any sort of desalinated water or anything, there's nothing wrong with it. It's all clean and everything. I think that if you want to step it up a little bit, and especially if you have some medical concerns. So for example, one of the waters we make is an alkaline water. This has become kind of a buzzword, and sometimes you'll hear dietitians say, oh, alkaline water isn't good versus it's not. I think, it really comes back to a couple of things. I think one thing I've been really disappointed with in the region is this idea of alkaline water that I haven't really seen elsewhere, where in order to reach a level that is considered alkaline water with the pH level, the natural way of achieving that is by adding more minerals, right? So the more minerals you add, the pH level rises, and of course it
becomes
creates
more
alkaline
rather than acidic.
But you'll notice in the region that you will have regular normal amounts of minerals, yet you have a really high pH level. So there's an additive that's being added to raise that pH level, which I don't believe in at all. So if you're thinking of using alkaline water, for example, I'm not really sure why, but when I got to Qatar, I don't know if it's the foods I'm eating, but things felt more acidic. So I was popping a lot of acid medicine. Well, just drink some alkaline water and it'll settle your stomach naturally. But again, you have to pay attention, just flip it. If it looks like it's just really low minerals, regular minerals, it's not real alkaline water. So for us specifically, one of the things, we have Dr. McClendon on our board, and the feedback that he gets us is that first world countries like ours, the two main things that are really missing in our diets are magnesium and potassium. So in our water, we make craft water, so we add that extra magnesium, we add that extra potassium. I think those things are really important, whether for men and women. We're seeing it across health magazines about the importance of magnesium and potassium. So those are the main things that we focus on, and as new product lines that we're pushing out, whether using real electrolytes and doing it in the proper way, organic way. One of the product lines we're pushing out as well that I'm really excited about as well next year is a brand called Sky Pop, and it's basically the idea of using very clean water and basically adding organic flavors to it, so organic extracts. And also, if you're the kind of person who likes Diet Coke or Diet Pepsi, it's terrible for you. I can't even mention how terrible it is for you. but we like to drink it, I think, especially if you come from this region. So we're doing an organic spin on soda and making it just cleaner. But I think overall, the feedback that we've gotten about our water, and frankly, I didn't see it coming, was people with kidney issues.
Yeah.
And we had one Qatari specifically that mentioned that he got off a bunch of his kidney medication, and his doctor specifically said it's because of the water you're drinking. Now, it's really difficult for us to link it to, is it alkaline water? Is it the water maybe with less salt? Is it the minerals? Is it just because it's not chlorinated, so your kidney isn't working overtime? There's so many different factors, but it's really beautiful when we get that sort of feedback as well. So I think, again, getting back to your questions, the minerals and all that, it just really depends on what sort of, I think, health goals that you have. And the one thing I do want to say is that there's so many people that will comment about how expensive water is getting, right? Especially if you're getting into more premium water. But what shocks me is that these things, our water, are going inside of our bodies, inside of our system to fuel us. And we complain about paying a couple of reals for it, yet we'll buy a $10,000 purse that just houses junk that we carry around. So I think that we just need to kind of relook at our priorities in the sense of health versus, beauty and fashion.
Definitely.
And definitely make that a priority for the future.
Definitely.
One little addition, if I may.
Yes, please.
When I was at Climate Week in New York last week, I happened to end up in a workshop with a water sommelier. So like with wine, this is a guy who actually puts like 7 different kinds of water, and you can actually taste the difference from 30 parts per million to 5,000 parts per million. And I didn't even know that you can get from nature carbonated water. So if you want to see a picture, I posted it on LinkedIn yesterday. But so this guy is letting us taste that and actually value this, and that also applies to young people, etc., to actually value this most valuable resource we have on the earth, rather than just to spraying it away.
I'll make sure I'll visit your LinkedIn page
Yes.
for the picture. So let's hear it from you. Any questions for the speakers? Yes, we have one here. We don't have a mic. Here you go.
Yeah, I have a question. Basically, the RO plants are the home-based RO plants are already available. So the main intention is to understand what is mineral water technically. What minerals to look for when you buy a local home-based RO. That is one. The second thing is the TDS is one of the most important factors in choosing the kind of RO plant or RO machine that you're buying for your house. And coming to that question about the kidney, the groundwater in most of the places is very heavy, and there are certain minerals which are damaging to the kidneys. So as a water expert, I would like you to really please explain us what to look at the label of the water bottle that we buy and the kind of RO plant that we buy for us. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so let me just start at the bigger things, not the bottles, but the bigger things, the RO plants. It's about 100 times more items in that water still than compared to us. So again, the way we do it is go back to the very bare basics and then remineralize it. We can actually put in ingredients A and B and see which ones is best. We don't make bottled water, so I will leave it to Rana.
Okay, so as a water expert, you know that in the GCC, we are given specific guidance about, at a minimum, how many minerals have to be there per bottle. So you'll find minerals such as calcium, potassium, magnesium, all of these different minerals that by regulation have to be inside of, and of course at different levels. The one thing that is not regulated really is the sodium requirements. There's nothing that really talks about that. And I think the other thing too is, as you mentioned, I'm just a really huge believer in the less processed something is, the better it is. If some of you are old enough to remember this, but if you remember like in the 2000s and the 90s, there was this huge push about low-fat this and low-fat that, and yes, that was the thing, right? So everyone got on these low-fat, overly processed yogurts and milk and all of that, and now we're being told just the opposite, that actually fat is brain food, and that's not what was making, for example, America fat. It was the sugar, right? So I really feel in the same way of water. I think the less processed it is, I think the better. And like one of the things that we offer to our subscription subscribers is that we don't, if you come into our water plant, we don't store water. I'm really big about water that sits for a long time, especially in countries like the GCC that are sitting in plastic bottles, and the water is just sitting there in these cheap plastic, and it's just the toxins are being released are really quite unbelievable. And that's why, by the way, in the GCC, any water that is sold, it only is allowed a shelf life of 1 year, because most of it is sitting in plastic. But with that, I think that less processed is better. And this is one of the things that we do is just great when you grab this water from the air. There's just not a lot of processing. I think that one of the things that people get shocked when they come on a private tour of our water plant is they're expecting this huge industrial process, and it's not. It's actually very simple, and we did that on purpose because we wanted to showcase how easy it is to stand one of these up and just drop them where you need it, right? So I think that this is one of the things that we do, whether it's the oxidization process as well. It's very quick, it goes in, and it's just a holding tank, and off it goes. So I think this is really important at the ethos of us making water, is just make it pure. Less is better, I think, overall. And I'm a big believer about the chlorination process. I just think that bypassing that whole process is really, really important and unnecessary depending on the water sources. Unfortunately, with ground and such, you've got to go through a certain cleansing process for obvious reasons. But I think this is why I would say the number one feedback about our water when someone drinks it is,
yes,
it's so light. It's so light.
Yeah, that one makes a difference.
So it makes a huge difference.
So our time is up. Thank you so much for joining us, Rana and Audrey, and thank you so much for being here with us. Please enjoy the rest of the sessions today. Thanks.
Thank you, ma'am.